Hey everybody, welcome back live at Drew's house, Joppa Afternoon Drive, another edition from our Newburyport studios. Hope you're doing well as we fly through October. Time is winter's going to be here before we know it. I feel like I've started the last 3 shows this way, but I feel that way. I can feel winter closing in. But anyways, very excited about my guest today. Longtime friend. I learned so much about her during our days together in the WBZ newsroom. The voice of WBZ News Radio for, well, so many years. My whole time I've ever known it. Diane Stern. How are you, Diane?
I'm fine, Drew, and it's great to see you again, and in a non-work situation for me.
Yes, that's true.
I know this is part of your work repertoire, but
it feels not like work, so this is good.
Yeah, this is fun.
First of all, how have you been?
I've been great.
Yeah.
I've been extremely busy.
Yep.
If you want any retirement tips, I'm here for you.
Yep.
Yeah, very busy on a couple of boards, committees. We just got through with the Salem Literary Festival,
Yep.
which is in September. It's put on by the Salem Athenaeum, and we had authors from all over the country and from the UK and Canada. And that was fabulous. It was very successful. So,
Wow.
your listeners should know about that every
Yes.
September, Salem Literary Festival.
Oh, good to know. All right,
Yeah.
another fall idea for us.
Yeah.
What's the what year was it that you said goodbye to WBZ?
I think, isn't this funny?
Really?
Because I get it mixed up with my husband, who
okay.
retired a year before I did.
Yeah.
I think it was the end of 2017.
Okay.
So 5 years, or 2016. No, I guess it's 2016.
Okay. You know what's funny? The story I always remember about you is you told me somebody else had retired. I don't know if it was Anthony Silva who retired before you and you worked
Yes.
with for many years, but somebody else had retired. And I just remember having a private conversation with you in the WBZ newsroom. And you said, I don't know, I think everybody kind of assumes that, maybe I won't be far behind. And you said, I'm just not there yet. Like, I'm still enjoying the job and,
Right.
Or whatever the word was, but you just said, I'm not there yet. So no.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of, then the one day you told me that, it's going to happen. And I was just like, oh no, I needed more time. It was just a big change.
Well, it is something that you kind of feel in your bones. That sounds dramatic, but my husband
Yeah.
felt the same way. He worked at Channel 5.
Mm-hmm.
He was a news manager there, Neil Ungerleider. And, he just felt it was time to leave.
Yeah.
And I did too. So this must have been a year and a half after we had that conversation about, I don't feel it yet. But
Yeah, that would make sense.
you really know when it's time.
Really. And you knew for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Tough decision though, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And my husband and I both miss the newsroom camaraderie.
Still.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to have coffee with somebody you used to work with, but just that the newsroom humor, the gallows humor. I would not repeat this stuff, but we needed to do that because the stories are just so depressing.
Yeah.
That we had to just kind of shake it off.
Yeah.
Not that we felt that way in our hearts, but we just had to,
Yeah.
still be confident on the air and authoritative, and sometimes it's tough.
I actually wasn't even thinking about going in this direction, but now that you bring it up, the stories, I mean, a lot of times when I think of the ones that you just nailed, are one of the bigger stories for me, and first stories in the newsroom was the Boston Marathon bombings, of course, and you were on the air for that.
Yes. That was interesting because I happened to bookend it.
Yeah.
So I was there when it happened, and of course, it being radio, I could just rely on the monitors on TV and just some of the crazy pictures, and it was just unreal. So that began it, and then I was there with Jay Carney, who's a prominent defense attorney in Boston, and he came in on the day that Tsarnaev was sentenced.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so we had that conversation. So it was just bookending that whole horrible thing.
Yeah. What were those few days like? Because for me, those days, I will never, again, I'm younger, I'm living in Boston in those days, and living there was I have my own stories about living there. Just it's unique thinking about those guys being around for 3 days after that.
Right.
I mean, what do you remember when you think back of that actual coverage?
Well, I think about the fact that Boston was really shut down to traffic except for emergency vehicles. And
I mean, people think the quarantine was like a shutdown thing, quiet traffic. This was like, you were not driving.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah.
Anthony Silva and I
Yep.
did drive in because we had to get to the radio station. That was very surreal. It really, really was.
Yeah. I remember leaving my Brighton apartment one morning when they were still, I think they thought they were in New York, maybe was the story, but, and we were going into work, and I remember I'd just been home, and my now wife was in my apartment with me, and my boss called and said, "We got to get back in here. It's just too busy. We need all hands on deck." So I said, "Sure, drop everything and go." I'm thinking to myself as I'm walking out into this world where everybody's in their house. I'm like, "Wait, I'm leaving my girlfriend in this little apartment with this roommate who I like, but they don't really know each other, and now I'm going to work for what am I doing?" And like looking behind the trees, it's a weird day. It's just and then driving on nobody being there. It's a ghost town.
Right, and I think there are parallels to be drawn with 9/11.
Yeah.
Because we had to be there, the entire day, and I think we stayed over at a hotel at night. I mean, that was incredible, of course, everybody knows. And I remember, actually, I did come home that night, but very late. And my, at that point, 13-year-old daughter, when I walked in, was watching the TV coverage and crying, and I thought, oh, my goodness. How could I have done this to her?
Like you missed something or not being there, or what do you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I had to be at work, but then the mother in me thought, oh my gosh. I mean, she was fine afterwards, but just walking into the house and seeing her crying in front of the TV, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what's important to me. Yeah. Having a job like this, and certainly nurses and doctors and emergency people, you do have to make these decisions.
Yeah.
Whether they're right for you or not at the time or in hindsight. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It really is.
And it is. It's a different environment being in a newsroom, right? I always kind of describe it as, and whatever different role you're in at the time, but it's almost like, it's kind of like a plane that's flying. You're like super focused. There's adrenaline rushes, and sometimes you do have to like remove yourself and almost take a deep breath and, step outside or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a different environment, but anyways, so you still miss it though. You do, or would you say you miss it?
I miss the newsroom camaraderie.
You miss your friends, yeah.
I miss the group of friends. I miss the fun that we had. And certain Gil Santos. Oh my gosh, I miss him. He was so funny.
Yeah.
Off air and on air, he was just a hoot. And then, of course, there's the inimitable Jeff Brown, who is still on the air at WBZ, and he and I have a funny thing going.
Yes, he does. Jeff does a great job. He actually told. So do you remember? You might not remember this. I'm sure it was not as memorable a moment in your life as it was his. But when he first got hired, because he got hired later, I was actually at BZ before him. I don't know if you guys knew each other before that.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, if you remember, he actually jumped on as an anchor a little bit later in life because he did the traffic thing.
Yes, Metro Traffic.
Metro Traffic, yeah. Sure. He ran it as a boss for a while. But he said, he's getting into the newsroom and, doing a bunch of different roles. He was not, the big voice that he is now there.
Yeah.
And he said, so I wanted to meet Diane, and we had casual conversations, but he's like, I always envied her, and I thought she's obviously great. And so one day I made conversation by picking up the phone, calling her, and I said, he did his Ben Parker impression. I'm Ben Parker. And he hung up the phone, and he said, you did exactly that. You had that laugh, and he goes, and it was great. It opened up a whole conversation, and we really got to know each other. So
it really is funny.
It broke your concentration from whatever you were writing and had a conversation with Jeff, I guess. So,
indeed. Yeah. He not to dwell on Jeff, but he is a great guy. But he reminds me of, was it Ted Knight on the Mary Tyler Moore Show? I mean, there's kind of a false pomposity.
Yes.
And so that really brightened any day.
It definitely is. Well, yes, good folks over the years there. I see you have a lot of letters you've brought with you. Can you?
Well, I did, because I think it's important to mention that when I started in radio in the 70s, 1970s, there were very few women on the air. There was Anne McGrath. Susan Warnick was on radio before she was on television. Shelby Scott was one of the, Sarah Ann Shaw. I'm trying to think of some of the other women. There were very few. Yeah. So we were, I guess you could say, pioneers.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and I learned on the job. I mean, I really didn't have any, huge qualifications. I didn't go to journalism school, just the whole thing. I started selling radio time at a tiny radio station in Danvers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
My
how I got my
hometown.
start. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you ever told me that story.
Oh, yeah. It was WMLO, and here's the thing. WBZ is a 50,000 watt station.
Right.
WMLO was a 500 watt daytimer. So you couldn't hear it at night,
Yeah.
and very few communities could tune in during the day. And one of them was Wenham, and the president of, I guess you could say, the president or the general manager, I guess is more correct,
Yeah.
of WMEX happened to call me, Paul Kelly, and I really have him to thank for my start in Boston radio. And he just recently was named to the Massachusetts Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
How about that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was, kind of serendipity, I
Yeah.
guess, but I'm so glad that it happened.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So right in Danvers, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, that brings me to, and I'm not going to read them all. Just there's probably 5 or 6 here, but
Wow.
I did get letters from people and from women who disapproved of the fact that I was not at home taking care of the house
Wow.
and kids. I didn't have our daughter until later in life.
Yeah.
But still, just really old school, kind of misogynist
Wow.
thinking. So
People take their time to do this, huh?
to write, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Don't you have something better to do with your time?
Apparently not.
But and
Like,
then
what kind of things do they say?
well, one of them thought that I made huge mistakes all the time. Really cannot understand, I'm quoting now, the reason for the mistakes you continue to make while broadcasting. Used to have a special friend in broadcasting, and he told me it was not allowed. Also, you continue to use quarter of when giving time. He told me quarter of means quarter of the hour or 7 or 8 or 9, which is really 7:15, 8:15. I can't even understand this. She's already lost me. But I mean, really, it's amazing. Oh, and here's another one. I listened, and from WMEX, I went to WEEI, which at that point was the CBS All News station
Yep.
I was on in the mornings. I listened to WEEI for news and was surprised at a remark you made. You said that Kmart was banning records because of the language, and your comment sarcastically was, "Pardon me." And then she just goes on and on about, it's, I can't stand to hear foul language from a woman's mouth. Well, I didn't say anything. Yeah. Or anything more sickening than a woman who was drunk. What?
Wow.
I wasn't drunk. And even though I'm a woman, I think a woman's place is in the home, and the husband should be left the dignity of being the breadwinner for his family. And this is unsigned.
Oh my
So, I mean,
goodness.
just things like that. It's nuts. But that's what it was like.
I mean, you obviously read those at the time. I mean, what do you do with that? Do you just brush them aside and just truck on? Or obviously you kept them somewhere maybe for some fuel later in life. I don't
Right,
know,
for posterity.
Yeah.
Maybe I was hoping that things would change. And of course they have.
Yeah.
In fact, I think if you did a survey now, you would find there were more women in broadcasting than there are men.
Yeah, you probably.
Television and radio.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right.
But anyway, that's what the atmosphere was like.
Oh my goodness. Was it a different? I mean, was there any of that? I don't want to, put you in weird spots in the newsrooms, but did you get that feeling at all in those newsrooms? Like, okay, I've entered a place where maybe.
Yeah, just kind of, just condescending.
Yeah.
Well, she doesn't know what she's doing. Now, part of that was correct because I was learning on the job. But, just really mean-spirited and, dismissive,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And then after a while, I think they treated me as an equal. But
I was going to say, do you know going in that you're just going to have to, you know what, you're probably going to get some of this. Let's just earn it
Yeah.
with the work. You know
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
yep, pretty much.
Just keep trucking through. Because somebody wrote about the mistakes on there. One thing I always admired about you was, I mean, mistakes do happen in news. We all know that.
Oh, yes.
They certainly do. But you were, I can't, I mean, there was nobody like you as far as just like preparation. As far as I always said, you would never make a mistake because you weren't prepared. Like maybe somebody else messed up and didn't give you time to prepare. But if you had everything lined up, you knew when you were ready to go on. And I mean, you would have no problem telling somebody next to you, like, hang on, can't focus. I got to get through this before I go on the air.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was just, I always admired that because it was like you knew when you were in control, and you knew when it was time to goof around too. You would make people laugh in the newsroom. But when it was like business time, you would know. And I always said that led to like just very few mistakes on the air. It was like
goodness.
so natural as could be.
You should write to this woman. This is dated 1979. I don't know if she's still with us.
1979.
But anyway.
I wonder.
You talk about control. This is interesting, I think. The longer that I was in radio, the more control sort of physically I had. Because back in the day at WEEI, there was an engineer on the other side of the glass, and all we had was a microphone and an on and off switch.
Oh, wow.
So we weren't touching the cartridges of sound, which is what we had back then.
Yeah.
And now, as you know, Drew, and you're looking at it now, there's a board, there are they risers, are they called?
Yep, risers, sure.
Risers, buttons.
I actually don't know what they're officially called. I just know what they do.
Little black things.
Yeah.
So, but I like the fact that you control what you do, so the buck does stop with you.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on the air.
Yeah.
So it's invariably your mistake because you didn't have the riser up, or, you know. However, computers do fail, as you know.
They do.
As you know.
And I mean, you always took that approach too. I remember with, whether it be young writers that were coming in. I mean, I remember, you would go through, and you would help them too. You would say, let's go more in this way. You should never say this. Actually, a good time for that story, right? We had the old moment in the WBZ newsroom, the word. I don't think you mind me telling this story.
No, not at all.
Somebody had written, you had bumped into, was it geese? Turkeys?
No. Actually, I can I steal
you
the
tell
story
it.
from
Take
you?
the story. It's better from you.
So I was walking around in I live in kind of a rural community.
Yeah.
So I was walking and I saw a turkey, so I whipped out my cell phone and took a picture of it.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't go over, and the turkey started to charge at me and peck at me. And this was terrifying. It really, really was.
I'm sorry to laugh.
And I'm not a big hulking person.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was probably 10 years ago, maybe?
It's about right. Yep.
Right. Okay. And you know me and you know what I look like. Okay. So I was in great distress. A woman drove by in an SUV and she said, "Quick, come in the van or come in my SUV and I will take you down the street. I'll get you away from this turkey who's going berserk." So I thought, oh, how nice, and so forth. And I went home and told my husband about the turkey attack and forgot all about it. Our local newspaper had a police log in it.
Yep.
And here's the headline: "Elderly woman attacked by turkey on..."
Oh my goodness. So I'll take it from there because
Please
I
do.
remember the next day you came into the newsroom with the headline and giving it to everybody, not just the young people like me. I was probably 2 years there at that point. I'm still very much learning on the job. And you went around to everybody and you said, "Do you think that's an appropriate word to use for me?" Try answering that question. I mean, we were all, to this day, Diane, we joked about this as I was talking about doing the show with you here. We joked about it via a text message. To this day, that word does not get used at WBZ.
Yeah, and I think it's wise, especially
Elderly.
as I get into that.
Elderly is not a word
that
we
age
use.
group, demographic. Yeah, because elderly really is one thing to one person and one to another.
Yes.
I mean, there was a time when you could be 65 and that was considered elderly.
Yeah.
And now I think it's really pushed out.
Yes.
You
And
know?
at that time, and I think you're still biking, and I mean, look at you, you're unbelievable.
I still am.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that. Wow, 10 years ago that was, but that is still the.
I think so.
Anytime any of us see that word pop up, and it creates a good conversation about you. That was come running
My
in
one
with
contribution.
I wonder. Do you remember the writer of that? Well, it was the police log, I guess. But
Oh, yeah. It was it was a newspaper actually that does not exist anymore.
Yeah. Did
Because
you call the
community?
paper?
No, actually, I didn't.
Yeah.
I just kind of let it go. But this was the Tri-Town Transcript, and it was
Okay.
one of the community newspapers.
Yeah.
And then the paper that people get now, it has everybody on the North Shore, so it doesn't have as much coverage of your particular town. So,
gotcha.
Anyway.
Again, we're joined by Diane Stern, joining us, the longtime voice, WBZ News Radio in Boston. We're going back on some of the old radio stories and whatever else here today. Is it one of the ones we already mentioned? Is the story, and maybe it doesn't even have to be a big one, but is there one that just you'll never forget that like hit you in some sort of way, covering in real time?
Well, what I really liked were the medical stories.
Yeah.
Medical breakthroughs.
Is that the nickname? Is that why we started calling you Dr.
Dr. Stern.
Yeah.
And I do not have a degree in all things doctor. But I learned so much, and we're so blessed to live in the Boston area because of all the teaching hospitals and all the research that goes on at Harvard and MIT and, all of the hospitals. And that, I think, was the most interesting part of my job. So I would interview them, I would write the story, I would edit the sound and edit what I had written, and that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, there were other things. I interviewed Clinton when he was president. And they had said, no, we're limiting this to 5 minutes. Well, I got him to 7.
Wow.
So
I bet that's no easy feat pushing that, huh?
Well,
there's a lot of people around.
I think he is very fast and loose with the time anyway.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then I interviewed Barack Obama a couple of times on the phone, and he was delightful. But the first interview was kind of freewheeling. Oh, who's coming for Thanksgiving, and what are you going to have? That sort of thing. The next time, when his campaign really caught fire, his handlers were extremely strict.
Yeah.
And everything was just bump, bump, bump. And it got to be 5 minutes, and we're out of there.
Yeah.
That was it. So, things change, but he was still nice.
They do,
he was
yeah.
Still a great guy.
That's a good lesson for the kid. We get a lot of high school kids on here too that are doing good stuff in the community. How do you deal with that pressure? You're going to interview a sitting president or somebody who is going to become the next president.
Well, you have questions prepared.
Yep.
But you should also be prepared, or at least anticipate where a conversation will go. It may not be to your next question.
Yeah.
Just to make it go, well, like you and me.
Yeah.
It's just kind of flowing, I hope.
Yes, no, it is. You're the one who brought notes, not me.
Those letters, those damning letters.
What was the toughest interview you ever did over the years? You don't have to. You can name them if you want.
Yeah, well, some politicians were very difficult, notoriously.
Yeah.
I won't name him, but he was a congressman for a long time, and he was so snippety with everybody. And that was not a pleasure to interview him. On the other hand, there were other people who were just so easy to talk to, including some of the researchers.
Yeah.
But I remember Gladys Knight of Gladys Knight and the Pips, and she was talking about diabetes awareness. Alec Baldwin was kind of a fun interview.
Yep.
Dan Rather.
Oh, yeah.
Some really interesting people along the way. And then, of course, a lot of presidential candidates because of all the primaries in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Right.
Which was fun.
And we're kind of the BZ was the big station there. We would always go up to New Hampshire. New Hampshire people always check in with WBZ in Boston. It's funny, you just said congressman, and I was thinking I was young in that newsroom, and I'll always remember this. You'll like this story, I think. I had Congressman Barney Frank on the phone. And it was thrown at me like last minute, just newsroom got busy.
Right. Somebody
else was supposed to do it. And Drew, get through this with the congressman. I'm like, what are we talking about? It's quick, do some quick research. And I was like, okay, good. I know that story. I got it. Go, send it over. So I got Congressman Barney Frank on the phone, and he was what I thought rough with me. He didn't like me. Okay. After that, Congressman Barney Frank didn't like me. But we did 4 minutes. And then I think Lana Jones was going to end up picking up the sound from the interview. So she went back, the late Lana Jones, who, we all miss. And I went back and I go, no, he didn't really like me, right? She looked at me, she goes, oh, no, I thought he did.
Oh. It's hard to tell.
And she goes, no, that's just him. You did a good job. And I was like, oh. Thank goodness, I was like, because it was going to end up being her story, and I was like, okay, Lana said it was all right, very good. So that was like a good moment for me where I remember thinking to myself, okay, maybe don't look too much into those things. Those guys they have their own way sometimes.
Shout out to Lana Jones.
Yeah,
she was wonderful, and she said to me, and I've never forgotten this. She would have her equipment bag with her, so a tape recorder and microphone and cassettes or whatever. And she would say, Bye, I'm going out to play. She loved being a reporter, and she was so good. And she had the ability to distill very complicated court cases and make them concise and interesting and still come in under 40 seconds.
Yeah.
But she was just wonderful.
I remember when she did probably one of her last ones, now that I think about it, because of course she passed away so suddenly. Those were tough days in the newsroom. I remember that was just a down place because everybody liked Lana. But when she did the Bulger trial, you would never. I mean, that was like a vacation for her. That was like she would never have missed that.
Absolutely
you know.
loved it.
And I mean, they made the station, I remember, made a podcast of that because there was so much more there. Like 40 seconds, you say she did a good job doing the nuts and bolts, but she would take notes and notes and notes, and there was so much more there that we got to do more with this with Lana, you know?
Right.
She was unbelievable like that. She gave me the book Black Mass, which of course has now been turned into the movie and all that. And I remember probably one of my first couple of years at BZ and said, here, just keep it. Go read it, whatever. To read it. And I remember, sure, I'll go home. So I went home and read it. I remember being in my Brighton apartment. I think I read it in one night, no more than two. I was so enthralled because Lana had written notes on every little margin of the page, like almost every single page. And like I covered that. It was Tuesday night, remember dark stars, whatever.
Wow.
And it was just, I read more of the notes. I was like, this is unbelievable reading this book with her notes, who was there for so much of it.
Just gifted.
It was crazy.
Her dad was a lawyer, too. So maybe that
I didn't
was
know that. Interesting.
maybe part of her interest in court coverage.
So those are the newsroom stories. I guess you're talking about when you think back about missing all the newsroom camaraderie.
Yes.
There is camaraderie, too. It's like...
Yeah, because you're all working on the same...
It's a team.
Basic product.
Yeah.
And you all bring something different to the table.
Yep.
And there's a great team spirit in terms of helping each other, filling in for each other, last minute things.
Yeah.
Like your interview with Barney Frank.
Yeah.
Drew, would you do this? Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that.
Did you know when you left what you were going to do? Was it going to be always staying athletic, always staying whatever you're doing? Did you have a plan and you're executing it, or have things completely changed the way you planned?
I didn't think I'd be quite this busy, but at that time I had already started volunteering at the Immigrant Learning Center in Malden. Mm-hmm. So this is adult English learners, and that has just been wonderful. I'm on the board now there.
Wow.
And I have one student that I talk to on the phone. COVID really changed things, but that was wonderful. So I continued with that, and then I joined the Salem Athenaeum. Then I already put in the plug for the Salem Literary Festival. So that has taken a lot of time. I'm on the board of trustees there and on the literary committee. So that's almost like a full-time job.
Wow.
But the people there are wonderful, very interesting and intelligent, and love to learn and curious. And,
so you'll never slow down, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, no, I think once you slow down, you slow down. So you have to keep moving to keep moving.
I like that.
Yeah.
Again, we're joined here by Diane Stern, WBZ for so many years, and now, of course, doing a million other things here, staying busy. I still hear you on the radio. You're doing...
Oh, yes, the Tufts medical spots.
I like those. I mean, you obviously sound great. Did you ever have to work on your voice? Did any boss ever tell you need to be more this, you need to be more that, or were you always able to just trust the natural voice?
No. That reminds me of another... Oh, yes.
Back to the note.
Diane. And it's signed listener.
Oh, no.
Slow down so that we can understand what you're saying while broadcasting the news. What's the hurry?
Oh, my goodness. You were the perfect pace. That's another thing I always used to say about you. Perfect pacing. Because that's a thing. Some people go too fast. Some people go too slow. I mean, there is a rhythm to it.
Yeah, and I think there is a sweet spot. But, I was in the radio for more than 40 years, so if you don't get it, in that amount of time, then you're hopeless.
Yeah. I mean, and you saw different eras change. You mentioned, having different people. You're fully in control. At some points, maybe not as in control. You end up working with different editors, different writers. Mm-hmm. And it was ever a point where you said, "Ooh, I don't like the direction that's going. Too many cooks in the kitchen or something."
Yeah. I felt that way a little bit. What was difficult for me is when people hadn't finished something. Yeah. That I was supposed to read on the air. Right. Or, that was the tough thing. Yeah. Because this is a deadline business, as you know. I mean, split second. Yeah. Hitting the network at a certain point.
Yeah.
Getting out in time to air the commercials. I mean, it's a real time-based
That clock is a...
occupation. Yes, the clock, we live and die by it.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was, kind of an issue. But, never to the point where, I'm going to give this up.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you were first starting, too, and for really, still all the way through, but those early years, it must have been, the BZ was such a soundtrack to people's lives.
Oh, yes. I used to listen to it. I used to jump into my parents' bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And I can picture my father's alarm clock.
Yeah.
It was like a brown circle with sort of an off-white enamel cover. Anyway, so we would listen to Carl DeSuze
Yeah.
and Don Kent with the weather on WBC.
There it
and
is.
little did I know, that's where I would wind up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And what a run. My goodness.
Yeah.
You don't know, I don't think you're going to see, maybe the business in general doesn't allow it for that, but that kind of run that you had is just, it's an amazing longevity to be that good at the top of your game for that long. Do you ever think about that?
Well, I appreciate the fact that I was able to stay at the same station.
Yeah, that doesn't happen really anymore either for that long. If you think about it, I don't know how many big names like that are left. Matty was there for a while, but
he
he's
sure
gone to
was.
Kiss 108. But
Right.
there's not many people that are doing that.
Well, Anthony Silva did it.
He did it, yes, but
Gary LaPierre.
Yep.
But you're talking.
Yeah, currently, I just don't see that happening again.
I suppose not.
It's just a different business climate, I think.
Yeah.
The business is different.
No, I appreciated it because there was stability. My family lived here. We had our daughter growing up in the schools just down the road a piece, and so I appreciated that.
Sometimes I ask this question at the end with the rapid fire, but this is a good moment for it. What is your best advice to the young, aspiring journalist, let's say, or just somebody who wants to get in the radio or news or whatever? It doesn't have to be.
My advice is to listen, to really good broadcasters, veteran broadcasters.
Yeah.
Listen to the way they sound. Listen to the pacing. Strive to be, if you're going into the news business, strive to be authoritative without being sort of boring or monotone.
Yeah.
Just, keep working towards the sweet spot, I would say.
Well said. Well, that's good. This has been fun.
Yeah. Well, I knew it would be because you're terrific and, you are so fun-loving and yet so skilled at what you do.
Oh, stop it. Thank you.
What?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. And Ryan Rothberg, he's a young guy here. Hopefully he's learning some things as we go, producing
Terrific.
today's show. Get to listen to somebody as great as Diane today, Sarah Blackstone directing the show, and Sarah Hayden, the boss, making it all happen here. Did you enjoy our little studio? It's kind of nice what we got, right?
It is. It's
kinda good.
wonderful, and all the CDs there.
We got some new decorations.
Vinyl. Oh yeah,
Sarah,
very cool.
Sarah Hayden, the boss, we had like some of the views of the walls before, and I think the story goes her husband said, I really like the new show, the Drew show's good, but we got to cover up those walls. We need some more artwork or something. So then
it's great.
suddenly we had records come in and all
Love
that.
it.
So
Love it.
So we'll have some fun. We'll have music shows in here, and we'll do whatever. We'll have whatever is interesting at the time. So.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Can you play 60 seconds of our rapid fire game? We always have to do it for first-time guests.
Uh-oh.
Just very quick questions. Don't worry, it's painless. But it's just a good way to kind of get off subject a little bit. Favorite food?
Italian.
All right. You're a traveler. Favorite city you have ever visited? Boston obviously doesn't count.
Budapest.
Budapest. Can you tell me why? Follow up?
It's like Paris, but not as crowded.
Ooh, great answer. Okay. Favorite musician?
Or maybe Istanbul. I don't know. Now I'm showing off. Favorite musician?
Yep.
Kenny Rankin.
Ooh, okay. Interesting.
He passed away young.
Okay.
But I really loved his versions of songs.
Oh, all right. Very good. Favorite venue you've ever been to in the world, whether it be for theater, music?
Oh, my gosh. I can't answer that one.
Can't answer it?
Because I've been lucky. My husband and I have traveled a lot, even during COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick sidebar, how was COVID for you guys? It wasn't good for anybody, but did you get through it okay?
I tested positive, never had symptoms, and my husband, knock on Formica, has never gotten it.
Oh, my goodness.
So.
Wow, that's,
I think everybody's going to get it at some point.
Yeah, I've done a couple times myself. My wife works in the schools.
Couple times.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, with the schools.
So it's, she comes back and Not to just blame my wife for COVID, but oh man, that's too funny. And you mentioned the voices that you grew up listening to. Was there one news voice or one?
There was, and I'm not sure that the listeners would remember her or even know her. Her name was Rita Sands. She was on CBS National News, and I tried to sound just like Rita Sands.
Wow.
She was wonderful.
Yeah.
Authoritative, just, one of those honey voices, but, lots of depth to it. Anyway, Rita Sands.
All right. We're going to do a lot of Google searching here. This will be good. We're going to go dig that up. Well, Diane Stern, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time. You know how highly I think about you. There was nobody who did it like you in the newsroom. I always say that. It was a unbelievable example when I see some people, maybe not read that copy over again. I don't think you got it yet. It's one of those things that your preparation and always,
thank you so much.
It always just translated, and obviously you sound great on the air. Everybody hears that part, but they don't always get to see the behind the scenes work that made you sound so good, and you were just a great camaraderie person in the newsroom.
Well, we had a lot of fun. We had so much fun.
They really were fun days. They still are fun days, to be honest. I
sure.
genuinely enjoy being in the newsroom.
Yes, and when I record some of the spots
I see you
that
every
are
once
on
in a
now,
while.
I will pop by the newsroom and get a little bit of the flavor that I miss.
Yes.
So.
I'm always a little bit shocked to see you or anyone, because there was a 2-year period where it was myself and Jeff Brown. Jeff literally said to me one day during the pandemic, hard quarantine days, Drew, it strikes me that we're here at one of the biggest stations in the country here, in a little Boston studio, and it is you and I. And it was true. I mean,
oh, how weird that must have
writers
been.
Working off site at home. Can you imagine that? Writers writing from home, tapping in digitally? Yeah.
No.
I don't even know how they do that, but somebody made it work. But that was that. But Diane Stern, thank you so much for coming to our little show here in Newburyport. We appreciate it. Ryan, thank you. Sarah, thank you. Sarah, the other Sarah, thank you. This has been live at Drew's House, Joppa Afternoon Drive. Thank you, Diane. See you, everybody.